This move, 1. e4, is a classic opening choice that immediately contests the center and opens diagonals for both the queen and king's bishop, aiming to control key squares and develop pieces actively. This move symmetrically challenges white's central pawn, immediately opening the game and contesting control of the critical d4 and e4 squares, leading to many well-established classical opening lines. This developing move, nc3, supports the d4 pawn advance, aiming for a favorable pawn center and an aggressive central pawn presence in the early game, often leading to variations of the Vienna game. Developing the knight to f6 challenges white's central pawn and prepares for kingside castling, a common and principled response in many open games. This move, known as the Vienna Gambit, boldly challenges black's central pawn and aims to open lines for white's pieces aggressively, accepting a pawn sacrifice for rapid development and attacking chances. This move, 3. d5, immediately challenges white's aggressive pawn advance and seeks to open the center, creating tactical possibilities and disrupting white's intended attacking structure. This move opens the f-file, creating tactical possibilities on the king's side and potentially liberating black's bishop on c8. After recapturing the pawn with the knight, this move strikes at white's pawn center and initiates tactical complications, challenging white's aggressive f4 pawn push and potentially leading to open lines. This move develops a piece and supports the e4 pawn, aiming to challenge black's central control and prepare for kingside castling. This move, developing the bishop to a square where it can castle quickly, solidifies black's position and prepares to connect the rooks for future central control or activity along the wings. This move prepares to recapture the pawn on e5 while also developing the queen and connecting the rooks for future action. This move, by attacking white's queen and indirectly threatening the pawn on e5, attempts to gain material and disrupt white's pawn structure, but it gambles on white's queen not finding a safe square. This move opens the position and challenges black's knight while aiming to control the center and develop pieces. This move solidifies black's pawn center and prepares to contest white's central influence by reinforcing the e5 pawn and enabling the eventual advance of the d-pawn. The move qf2 prepares to recapture the pawn on e5 with the queen, while simultaneously protecting the e4 pawn and centralizing the queen for potential future action. This move initiates a tactical sequence that simplifies the position by exchanging a central knight for a pawn, opening lines for white's queen and rook development while challenging white's pawn structure. Recapturing the pawn with the queen re-establishes central pawn presence and avoids further material imbalance while preparing to develop remaining pieces. This move initiates a thematic attack on white's d4 pawn, aiming to exploit the weakened structure created by white's aggressive opening play and the recapture of the e5 pawn. This retreat of the queen to f2 aims to reposition it to a safer square, potentially eyeing the c5 square or supporting a pawn push while avoiding the immediate pin along the d-file. This move aggressively challenges white's central pawn control and aims to open lines for black's pieces, though it weakens black's kingside pawn structure significantly. This move aims to reposition the queen to a more active square, potentially targeting the kingside or offering support to a pawn push, while also avoiding an immediate confrontation with black's central pawn on f6. This move solidifies black's central pawn presence and prepares to contest the now open d-file, while also defending the e6 square and potentially allowing further development for black's kingside pieces. This aggressive queen sortie opens up white's king to potential counterplay after black recaptures. the pawn, compromising white's king safety for immediate material gain. This move aims to challenge white's aggressive queen sortie by opening the g-file, creating counterplay against white's exposed king and potentially freeing black's position. This aggressive pawn grab on h7, while superficially tempting, weakens white's king safety significantly and allows black to develop counterplay with their pieces, potentially leading to a dangerous attack on the weakened queenside. This move capitalizes on white's aggressive pawn grab with qx-g7, directly attacking the rook on g8 and exposing the white king, regaining material lost earlier. This move develops a piece and prepares to castle kingside, aiming to consolidate the position after the wild exchanges. This move recaptures the pawn with check, exploiting white's exposed king and creating immediate tactical opportunities while also recovering material. This move develops a piece to a better square, connects the rooks, and prepares to castle, all while defending against immediate threats. This move repositions the queen to a more active square, threatening the h2 pawn and preparing to challenge white's aggressive but potentially overextended kingside play. This aggressive queen sacrifice is highly speculative, aiming to create imbalances and open lines for a potential attack on the black king. But it leaves your own king exposed and a pawn down. Black's decision to capture the c2 pawn is a tactical gambit that offers compensation for the sacrificed material, aiming to disrupt white's pawn structure and potentially create attacking chances. The player is finally prioritizing king safety, a crucial step after a volatile sequence of exchanges and sacrifices, aiming to reinforce their position by tucking the king away. The move 17, Kd7 begins the king's flight from the center, seeking the relative safety of the kingside castled position, a common defensive maneuver when the king is exposed to open lines and attacking pieces. This move, K3, is a logical retreat, allowing white to regroup and consider developing their remaining pieces, as the queen has been actively targeted and is now out of immediate danger from black's active pieces. The move 18, Qg6 re-establishes an attack on white's kingside and aims to untangle black's position after a series of tactical exchanges. This move prepares to develop the kingside knight to h3, potentially contesting the active black bishop on e6 and solidifying the pawn structure by adding support to the f4 pawn. This move prepares to develop the queenside knight and also supports a potential queenside pawn advance, aiming to gain space and activate pieces. This move prepares to activate the rook on h1 by clearing the g1 square, aiming to improve white's kingside defense and potentially launch a counterattack on the weakened enemy position. This move repositions the bishop to a more active diagonal, eyeing the weak kingside and preparing to potentially contest white's central space. The move 21, Qf3 aims to neutralize black's active queen and prevent further threats, while simultaneously preparing to bring the queen back into the game to support white's central pawn structure and potentially attack the kingside. This move repositions the bishop to a more active central square, aiming to control important diagonals and potentially support pawn breaks or an attack on white's king. This move develops the bishop to an active square, eyeing the weakened dark squares around black's king and preparing to challenge the powerful bishop. On c5. This move, 22, bg4, repositions the bishop to an active square, aiming to exchange it for white's strong fianchettoed bishop and disrupt white's control over the light squares. The queen retreats to a safer square, allowing the bishop on f4 to defend the g3 pawn while preparing to support a potential knight sortie to e5. The capture on c3 achieves a significant material advantage by winning the bishop, disrupting white's pawn structure on the queenside, and opening a crucial diagonal for black's queen. This move initiates a favorable exchange, simplifying the position and removing black's active bishop while maintaining white's initiative and material advantage. Black recaptures the bishop, aiming to simplify the position and relieve the pressure on the king by trading material. This pawn recapture opens the b-file, which will be crucial for activating your rook and challenging black's control of the center. This move brings the rook to an open file, aiming to exert pressure on white's central pawn structure and potentially support a future pawn advance or attack. This move boldly aims to seize control of the center and open up lines for the rooks, challenging black's consolidated pawn structure and creating dynamic play. This move reroutes the rook to the second rank, activating it and putting pressure on white's queenside pawn structure while simultaneously preparing to contest the open c-file. This move activates the rook, preparing to contest the open c-file and defend the king while potentially supporting a pawn push on the queenside. This rook exchange is a strategic decision, simplifying the position and clearing the 7th rank, which could prove advantageous for black's king safety and potential pawn advances. This recapture on f2 is a necessary response to black's forcing sequence, simplifying the material on the board and preparing for a potential endgame after further exchanges. This move strategically repositions the knight from a somewhat cramped position to a more active square, eyeing central control and potential outpost squares, while also defending against immediate threats. This move aims to exploit the weakened pawn structure on the queenside and open the c-file for potential tactical opportunities and greater activity for white's rooks. This move attempts to reroute the queen to a more active square and potentially exploit the open c-file, but it risks leaving the king vulnerable to further attack from white's active pieces. This move wins a pawn and simplifies the position, forcing black to defend their king with fewer material resources. The king is forced onto a more active but exposed square, increasing its vulnerability to the opponent's remaining forces in the open c-file. This move initiates a powerful discovered attack on black's king, forcing material recovery and simplifying the position into a favorable endgame. The move nc5 aims to control the critical d3 and e4 squares, simultaneously attacking the undefended rook on c1 and disrupting white's coordination after the tactical exchanges. This move aims to reposition the bishop to a more active square, potentially targeting black's queenside pawn structure and supporting white's central pawn push. The move 32, rf8 is a tactical response aimed at eliminating white's active bishop on f4, a piece that has been instrumental in controlling key squares and maintaining pressure on black's position. By forcing an exchange, black seeks to simplify the game and alleviate the immediate threats, though it will also lead to a less active rook for black. This move initiates a queenside pawn push to gain space and potentially create a passed pawn on the queenside. This queen sacrifice tactic allows black to regain material and simplify the position after white captures, forcing white into a less advantageous pawn structure. The king's move to g1 is a prudent defensive maneuver, creating an escape square on f2 and safeguarding against any immediate tactical threats along the g-file or the e2-4 diagonal. This move attempts to create a pawn barrier to prevent white's pieces from easily penetrating black's kingside and to prepare for future pawn advances. This move boldly challenges black's pawn chain on the queenside, aiming to create weaknesses and open lines for white's pieces. This move repositions the rook to the now open e file, aiming to challenge white's control and prepare for potential pawn breakthroughs in the center or queenside. This move exploits the open file and pawn structure to create a passed pawn on the a file, aiming to disrupt black's coordination and potentially win material or create further threats. This pawn break opens the a file for black's rook and offers a critical counterplay opportunity, forcing white to address the potential invasion. This move, bxc5, is a crucial simplification that aims to neutralize black's active piece play, particularly the rook on e8, and solidify white's control over the d file, which is now open after black's pawn capture. This pawn move recaptures material lost on circa 5, clearing the way for your rook to potentially become active on the now open c file and pressuring black's queenside pawns. This move activates the rook to the f file, creating pressure against black's weakened kingside and aiming to exploit the open file for potential breakthroughs or material gains. This move places the rook on a more active file and prepares to support potential pawn advances or challenge white's control of the center. The move 39, qc2, activates the queen to support the pawn on c5 and prepare for potential kingside play or pressure along the second rank. This move aims to secure the c-pawn as a potential passed pawn, but it critically ignores the ongoing threat on the kingside and the opponent's active pieces.